Do you think UFOs, the paranormal, weird history, cryptozoology, and outsider art are pretty darn cool? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to High Strangeness with your host, Steve Berg.
The video version. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of High Strangeness. Tonight, I have my good buddy, Red Pill Junkie on. And look, I can't remember exactly where the first time I heard Red Pill Junkie interviewed, but when I did, I immediately knew I loved this dude's perspective on the strange and unusual. He's willing to not cast judgment on stories, and he knows the history and the culture that surrounds UFOs and Forteana, while still remaining cautious and skeptical of it all. The way RPJ writes about these topics in the Daily Grail is done with love, a critical eye, and a wonderful sense of humor. Miguel, Red Pill, my man, thank you so much for coming on and giving me your time.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to once again have a chance to talk to you, Steve.
Yeah, you too, my friend. You too. And I was thinking about this afternoon. I met you at Paramania in Los Angeles, and I was trying to think of what year that was, man. Was that 2016?
Yes, I believe
right?
So, or was it 2017? I think it was 2017.
Yeah, and I remember you were the person I was most excited to meet because you, at the time, were really like making a big splash in like at least the kind of the circles that I dwell in, and you for a while were wearing a mask when you would appear on screen in a picture. I'm like, who is this man? I couldn't wait to meet him and like finally see the unmasked dude. And you were just such a wonderful dude to hang out with. We had so much fun. We went to an incredible, I can't remember the name of the bar, Clifton's in downtown Los Angeles, and had an amazing night.
Right. And before that, we were in some library or somewhere. Yeah. We had this, this is a tradition of Paramania. We have all these presentations, very informal ones. But still, it's not just about revelry and, getting floored with, your favorite beverage. It's also about learning and sharing things. I remember you said something about fishing. I said something like, you said something about you don't particularly like fishing, but then I'll say something like, I like fishing. I said, well, and that is awesome. It was very funny that.
Oh man, I'm a weird individual, my man. But I just remember that being that was the first time I think I met, and I remember Adam Gorightly was there, and I was really starstruck by him. And he brought us all like little patches, Discordian patches.
That's right. I still have mine.
Yeah. I do too. I cherish it. But yeah, that was just so fun because I remember, we did that. I think Greg Bishop got us that room at the library, and people just kind of did impromptu presentations, and it was just fantastic. I remember being so excited because I sort of looked at that group, yourself included, as kind of like the punk rockers of UFOs, and just people who were thinking of and talking about this stuff in totally new ways I had not heard of. And it really got me invested in UFOs and Fortean studies in a whole new way. And I'm really grateful, man, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, so was I. I mean, if you think about it, in retrospective, the circumstances of that got us you there in Los Angeles and me, of all people.
Yeah.
I mean, a Mexican who had actually the less business to be there, among all an American audience. It's quite remarkable, it's so unforeseeable. We were talking about what I was doing like 20 years prior to that. I was just a very clean-nosed industrial designer working very hard, 24/7 on a small, architectural practice, doing stuff. And what I used to do on not in my spare time, but, there's a lot of spare time when you're doing things like renderings, computer renderings, and you let the machine render, and you need to see if the lights and all the textures are okay before you hit the big, render button, and then let the machine run the whole night, or maybe even 3 days straight.
Right. Jesus.
And what I used to do was listening to a lot of podcasts, and reading a lot of blogs like Mike Lennon's Hidden Experience. That's the thing I used to do on the wee hours of the night on that small office when I was all by myself, 10 p.m. No one was there. No one was bothering me anymore. No phones ringing. And I was just enthralled, reading all these things and listening also to Adam Gorightly's Untamed Dimensions.
Absolutely.
I was listening to that, constantly listening to Tim Vinal of America. I think I listened to some of those podcasts like at least 4 or 5 times straight,
Same here, man.
They were comforting to me for some reason,
Yeah.
And then what happened was that Micah Hanks, the guy from the Micah Hanks show.
Yeah, sure.
Before that, the Grayling Report, decided in 2012 that they were going to create this big, almost like a farewell doomsday party, the end of the world party, because of all this nonsense about the end of the world.
Yeah, the Mayan calendar
thing. And all that. Oh my God, what's going to happen? So he and a friend of his, Scotty Roberts, decided to create this conference, the Paradigm Symposium.
I remember that, and I remember wanting to go really bad. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the one time that I say, okay, I need to stop being this person sitting behind the screen, just interacting with, text in front of me, or listening to voices of people I'm never going to meet in person. I need to do something about it. And the circumstances somehow managed to arrange themselves so neatly, because I didn't have the money to go there. But about that time, I got a very unexpected email from Benjamin Grundy, one of the owners of Mysterious Universe, who asked me if I wanted to be one of the writers for Mysterious Universe.
Wow.
And that's when I said yes, of course. And that money really came real handy when it came to, paying my flying expenses and such. And that's when I decided to, just to go there, bite the bullet, and try my best to contain my hermit impulses of just staying, inside my turtle shell, not interacting with people, and just actually go there, and one of Micah's friends was the one who came up with the idea of the luchador mask, and said, wouldn't it be cool if we actually met Miguel and he was wearing one of those red luchador masks? And I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to go to the place in Mexico City next to Arena Mexico, where all these lucha libre fights are held. I went there and I bought one, and I had the advantage that no one actually knew my face. I'm a very reserved person. There wasn't actually any social media. Well, not like we have now.
Yeah, it wasn't thriving then. Yeah,
exactly. But I didn't share any images of me. Exactly. So I remember walking into the hotel lobby with the people there, and wearing this stupid luchador mask. And I know that I don't particularly fit into the stereotype of the Mexican. No offense to my countrymen, I'm 6'4", so I'm a little bit above the average of the height here in Mexico. So I'm going there, and I'm wearing these, and I go straight to Micah Hanks. Obviously, I know who Micah is. And I rolled some piece of paper from my pocket and started to speak in the worst accent ever. Hello, Micah. I'm very happy to meet you here, at the Paradigm Symposium. And I'm looking at the expression of all these people, and it was incredible. It was almost, I always tell friends that it was almost like my own uh, experiencing what Alejandro Jodorowsky calls psychomagic,
Right.
This because it was almost like an exorcism for myself.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm a very shy people, and I'm very introverted. I don't like, like I'm not the type who goes out to bars at night,
Right.
whatever.
Right.
But I was doing this, which was totally uncharacteristic to me, and it worked better than anything I have ever dreamed of, because everyone was so warm and welcome. Everyone was so happy to see me. I don't think I slept more like than 4 or 3 hours in that whole trip. And I don't know how many, like ounces of alcohol I consumed. I didn't have any like hangover whatsoever. I was, waking up like at 7 in the morning, fresh to see all the presentations and partying with all of them until the wee hours of the night. It was really one of the best experiences of my life. One of the best things I ever did was actually going to that trip, putting on that stupid red
I
mask.
loved it at the time. It gave you an air of, a mysterious kind of vibe. And I was
Exactly,
like, who
yeah.
is this guy? I'm intrigued.
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
because like, I also do remember going, and this is going back a ways, but, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a blog called UFO Mystic that was,
Right.
I think, 5 or 6 contributors. And I remember that's where I first heard of Mac Tony's, but
Mhm.
you used to comment a lot on that as well. Am I right
Oh
about
my
that?
God. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Like every time that Nick or Greg posted something on UFO Mystic, I will always leave a comment.
Yeah.
That was the thing I did back
Yeah.
then, before Twitter,
Right.
before Facebook. The thing that I used to let as an outlet
Yeah.
to interact with the Fortean community, the Fortean blogosphere, as I
Right.
used to call it, was through comments.
Yeah.
I felt it was I almost felt that it was like etiquette.
Mm-hmm.
If someone had the trouble of actually posted something that I enjoyed,
Yeah.
the least thing I could do was to reply and say, hey, I enjoy this, and I actually think this and this and this about it. And by the way, you might find this and this and this and this that I found somewhere else of interest to you. And I thought that was the thing that the service that I was providing to the community, and say,
Right.
hey, this thing that you're talking about, it reminds me of this other thing that this other guy actually wrote about that. You might want to check that out.
Right.
I felt like some kind of like Fortean matchmaker of sorts.
Yeah.
Trying to help connect people.
It really resonated with me because I remember that I believe was probably the first time I'd ever read anything he wrote. And I just remember I never commented on that because I was too intimidated because everyone was so smart. But I remember reading your comments and Mac's comments and just go like, oh, these guys are really sharp dudes who have read a lot about these topics, because that was the greatest thing about UFO Mystic is that they would write this great blog, and then the comment section was just as like enriching and educational, because
Yes.
it was not a huge wide variety of commenters, but there was kind of this core group, and you were part of that. And I just remember that was an amazing education for me.
Yeah,
I got hip to a lot of books and just new ideas and thought experiments, and it was really important for me.
Yeah, it was an education to me for actually to try to learn to deal with skeptics and people who didn't share my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember, there was this guy who used the nickname the Sage.
Yes.
And this guy was, we will consider him a troll. under our modern definition of the term. He was a guy who just went there to rant,
Yeah.
and to criticize and to be in opposition of whatever it is that Nick and Greg used to write about. And I remember that Greg tried to interact with him very lightly, and then he will drop it, like say, okay, I don't have time for this.
Yeah.
But me, on the other hand, was like trying to get into this guy and trying to start some sort of dialectic, of never never losing my temper. And I remember that back then, when my English wasn't as improved as it may be right now, I had the advantage of when you write and speak in a second language, it's very interesting, Steve. You are not letting that the thing you are communicating, it has to come from here instead of here, instead of from your gut.
Interesting.
You actually need to really think what you're trying to say, because you are writing in a different language. You are trying to convey it as clearly as possible, which is not always easy. And that helps you to almost not censor you, but it allows you to diffuse whatever it is, sentiment it may blind you to write in a logical, or at least in a dispassionate matter.
Right.
And that allowed me to establish really, really long, I don't know, I don't want to call them fights, but it was discussions with this guy, this sage, that lasted weeks. I remember, going back and forth, and trying to find some common ground with this guy. And the problem is that whenever I try to actually say, you know what, you convince me, I think you are right about this, and then they will say, no, you're wrong. It's like, oh, okay. So I see that this guy, what is happening is he's getting off by just being a contrarian,
Yeah.
And when I realized that, and then I'll say, okay, I mean, this is educational for me, but to some point I need to actually let it go, because it will be more productive to just do other things, read other stuff, establish meaningful conversations with people who are not just trying to prove to themselves and themselves alone that they are the smartest person on the internet.
Right.
Which is like, okay, congratulations, here's your crown, king. All
you
hail
win,
to the
man.
king. Yes, all hail to the sage.
But I wonder, because I guess when I sort of became friends with you in that group, we were just kind of talking about Greg, and Josh Cutchin, Tim Banal, and that kind of core Paramania crew. It really was the first time in my life, because I've been into this stuff since I was a kid, but I always kind of kept it to myself.
Right.
Because whenever I talked about it, even in my adult life, people were like, oh boy, you're like a weirdo, aren't you, man? You might be a little nutty. And so I really was really guarded and careful. And when I found you, became friends with y'all, it really was so important to me, where I felt like, oh my God, it was like a sigh of relief, where I felt like, oh, here's a community. I know that word gets thrown around a lot, but I don't know what else to call it. But it was a community of people who were super nerdy about this stuff, like myself. And I felt like for the first time in my life, I could have meaningful conversations with people, and I didn't have to explain myself.
Right. You found your tribe, is what I
found my tribe.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because I'm sure
it was even more unlikely for me, like I said, in Mexico. Imagine it was even more difficult to me to express those things. I had to actually interact with a community of people who didn't speak my own language for me to feel safe to actually express all this stuff. Imagine.
Yeah. I mean, and it really is it's a beautiful thing. And I do think that's one wonderful thing about the internet and social media, obviously, is that you being really into this stuff, being into UFOs and the paranormal and Fortean studies, it can be a very lonely pursuit. And for a long time, I
Yes.
used to be like bummed out. And when I would try to talk about UFOs with people, back in like in 2015 or something, like, he's like, "Oh, you believe in aliens from another planet coming?" I'm like, "Well, no, not exactly. That's not what I'm saying." But then, when I tried to explain myself, they would roll their eyes at me like, "Anyway," and like, and God bless that, like, I'm not like mad at them. If you're not into it, you're not into it. But
Mhm.
it's just a really wonderful feeling to be able to like talk to a dude like you, and I don't have to explain what I'm talking about. You know the references, like, I can drop a
Right.
case or drop a line from a Keel book, and you're like, yeah, I totally know what you mean. I'm like, it's so nice.
Hmm. Hmm.
I really value that, and I know this is kind of a question you've probably been asked a million times, and it's a question that maybe you're sick of even hearing, but I want to know this. Were you into this stuff as a kid? Like, when did you like really like, it, when did this become more than like a passing interest?
Mm, I don't know. Like I said, like you said, this is the kind of stuff that kids are really, really interested in.
Uh-huh.
It's almost like drawing and painting
Yep.
and making music. It's the stuff that kids are always enjoying doing. Sitting on the grass with a notebook, pad, some crayons, and humming some tune. But that's the stuff that you supposedly have to grow out of,
Yeah.
in order to have more productive interests,
Yeah.
interests that will help you like get a good job.
Yeah.
Problem is that I never managed to find any.
Yeah.
Well, that's not necessarily true. I was a very good student all of my life. Always straight student, always
Uh-huh.
Hall of Honor, all that stuff. Uh, my father always expected of me to go and study some kind of like engineering.
Right.
My mom, I guess she didn't care. And at some point, I even thought I was going to be, a scientist. And no, actually, there was a time when I thought I was going to be a priest. If I'm honest,
Interesting.
yeah. There was a time because obviously Mexico, you grow out Catholic, and I always study in private Catholic schools
Mm-hmm.
because those schools in Mexico are the best.
Right.
You have two systems of schools in Mexico. You have the private schools that are often run by religious organizations, and you have the public system, which are, for the most part, at least until you reach to a certain level, very, very soft power.
Right.
You know, so my parents always made the effort to educate me and my sisters in the private schools run by religious organizations. And there was a time when I was really, really into religion. I don't know
Yeah.
if you remember these movies, The Mission,
Oh yeah. With
right?
Robert De Niro.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
movie really, really impacted me. Uh, Also, I have to say that one of the reasons that I wanted to become a Jesuit was because of The Exorcist. you know,
I mean, if you think about it, being a priest and being like a paranormal investigator, they're not that much different in
exactly.
some way. Like,
I was appealed by the idea of living this very, Spartan life dedicated to knowledge.
yeah.
Because the Jesuits are like the intellectual elite of the church. Like teaching in some university.
Mm-hmm.
Living in some dorm, educating young minds, and maybe if need be, putting on the frock, putting on the cross, and grabbing the holy water and go and battle with the
Yeah.
devil, and the power of Christ compels you. That felt so badass.
Yeah,
I
it
said,
is pretty
yeah,
badass.
that could be it. But well, eventually, I got disenchanted with the dogma of the Catholic
Mm-hmm.
Church. Many of the things that they said never didn't make any sense to me.
Right.
Restrictions about sexuality and all this stuff. Like, say, okay, you're telling me God doesn't want us to engage in this stuff, but at the same time, this is the stuff that God used in order to create life.
Yeah.
What's the deal? So that's when I decided to try to find a way to combine my artistic desires with my scientific or analytic proficiency. And I said, well, maybe if I study industrial design, that would be a good way to combine those. Maybe like a sort of modern Renaissance man. And back in those days, back when United States and Mexico and Canada were going to sign NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, everybody said, well, that could be a good opportunity to study this thing like industrial design, because then there were all these opportunities, whatever. Obviously, my teachers never warned me that what Americans wanted from Mexico was just cheap labor, and just to put these maquiladoras where all the designs and all the know-how or to think how to create the things will be decided up in the States,
right?
And the Mexicans were just going to be, just to be on this like assembly line,
yeah,
and churning things on and off for 12 hours straight without any bathroom breaks.
Right?
That's not the thing that.
That's American business, baby. No, you go to the bathroom when you get home.
Exactly.
Yeah. Fantastic.
So it's weird, how things take you, and then you remember your love for the paranormal.
Yeah.
And you go and still read about it. There were a lot of cool paranormal magazines that you could buy here in Mexico. I guess you can still. They're edited in Spain. Año Cero. Enigmas, Espacio en Tiempo. So that is the thing that helped me to establish this backbone of knowledge. Before I went on to discover other stuff like John Keel and Jacques Vallée and all the stuff that I actually got educated with when I became a member of the Daily Grail. In the 2000s.
That was gonna lead me to my next question, because I have been an avid reader of the Daily Grail. To me, it's the greatest weekly weird news, and the articles are so amazing. And you're my favorite contributor. But even kind of going, I wanted actually, before I forget, I want to mention that your scientific mind and just maybe your experience, even wanting to become a priest, you do have a real knack in your writing of analysis and comparative analysis. And you also have a much deeper understanding of science than a lot of people who write about this stuff. I mean, I have no knowledge of science at all. But I feel like you are able to synthesize it and write about it in a way where an idiot like me can actually understand it. And that is a gift unto itself. And you're writing it in your second language. So, I mean, was that something you were you kind of knew you could do? Is that to infuse all these different avenues into an article and a piece? Because obviously you have the background knowledge about the paranormal and UFOs, but to be able to take, new scientific discoveries and write about them, because you just don't write about the paranormal and UFOs. I mean, a lot of the things you write about are tangentially related, but you'll tackle scientific subjects. I'm like, damn, I'm really impressed, Miguel.
Thank you. I mean, like I said, aside from paranormal magazines, I also loved reading scientific magazines like Discover, Omni, Wired. Love going to read Wired, National Geographic.
Right.
I've always been someone who has a hunger for knowledge. Like,
Yeah.
I was the nerdy kid that will go and each day grab one of the volumes of the home family's Encyclopedia Britannica and just, go there and pick a random article and start reading,
Right.
Reading about geology, mineralogy, astronomy, biology. It didn't matter, when I said that my father had this hope that I would become an engineer. I also thought that I would become an engineer, but my problem is that I couldn't figure out which engineering I wanted to study because I was interested in everything.
Right.
Say, I cannot just pick one. I like mechanical, but I also love computers. I loved, learning stuff, and it became natural to me, going into the computer and trying to figure out and just out of frustration, striking the keys and see what happened. Now, when it comes to writing, and I really appreciate what you're saying about it because it didn't come natural to me. I never considered myself to be a writer. The very first thing that I wrote for the Daily Grail, I remember back then the format of the page allowed each member to have a free blog, which was really cool for Greg Taylor, the editor and the owner of the Daily Grail.
He's great. He's great.
Anyone can write their own blog to share their ideas with the community.
That's
whatever
so awesome.
it is, right?
What a great idea. What a thoughtful thing to do.
Yeah, and they were really good writers sharing really, really cool stuff. Obviously there are people who were a little bit out there, but
sure.
It comes with the territory.
Yeah, it sure does.
And remember the first time that I wrote something, it was some kind of like a blog asking for people to donate for some type of a natural disaster that had happened in Mexico. I think it was in the state of Tabasco, some hurricane or whatever. And I remember, it took me forever, to write something that was like less than 500 words.
Right.
And I remember reading it the second day and I was like, it's terrible. That's the kind of person that I am. I've always been a perfectionist. I'm a person who was always agonizing with himself about trying to always polishing your craft, always trying to write something better than the last time you wrote something. Never give for granted that people are going to read you. I remember, and this is something that Greg Bishop actually taught me, and this is something that Greg was taught by his friend Skylar Alfagren.
Yeah, Skylar Alfagren, yeah.
I remember.
Rest in peace.
I remember Greg telling me that he once showed Skylar one of his articles for review, and Skylar was, bless her heart, merciless. Read the first paragraph and said, I don't know why I should keep reading after this. Yeah. And there's something that someone will say, oh my God, you don't have to be so mean. I'm doing my best. But,
I do have feelings.
But that is something that a writer should always keep on the back of his mind,
Yeah.
Why should the reader keep going after you put there? Where are you leading him to? Where are you going with it? What is the point?
Right.
And it's hard,
Oh, it's so hard.
Obviously, writing is, to me at least, a far harder craft than something like drawing or painting, which is also obviously difficult in its own. It has its own set of difficult rules you have to follow. But trying to convey something coherently with just words, which is it's an interesting form. It's almost like a form of telepathy, if you think about it. I mean, I'm thinking of something and then I'm trying to put it in symbols that are meant to be sounds coming out of our mouth, and then someone will read that, and then they will mimic those sounds in their heads, and they will convene and try to think of the same thing that I was on my mind, like maybe 2 years ago or 10 years ago. But yeah, this is something that I'm passionate about not just writing about the same old, because it would be so boring.
Right.
And as you well know, the UFO phenomenon is not just about just one thing.
No.
To think, oh, well, aliens coming to our planet through metalcraft. Okay, fine. But in order to write about that, you need to know about astronomy, physics, geography, biology, history, and then for that you need to learn about mythology. I need to learn about psychology. I need to know about parapsychology, and it goes and goes and goes. And that's the thing I always ended up loving about the UFO phenomenon. It makes your life so much richer.
I could not agree more. I say that all the time in the show. You really nailed it, because this is not my quote. I believe it is attributed to Jeffrey Kripal, but he said UFOs are one of those subjects where the first year you start reading UFO books, and by year 2 you're reading about Arabian mystics from 2,000 years ago.
Exactly.
And that could not be more true, because when I look at my library, sure, I have a lot of UFO books and like Fortean books, but then I have a lot of spiritual books and books about like world religions and about the Celtic fairy faith. I mean, like, in all these books I read because I want to understand the UFO phenomenon better. It's not that I am interested in religion and spirituality and all that stuff, but like, it's really because I'm trying to understand UFOs more. So I think you really nailed it. One thing, after I kind of discovered you years ago, it was not long when you kind of popped on the scene where you were being asked to do the covers for a lot of some of the greatest Fortean books that have come out in the last 10 years. Do you mind mentioning a few of those covers?
Well, thank you. I mean, it was very, again, something very organic, very like the way that my life unfolded. I remember returning from the Paradigm Symposium and showing to Greg sketches of the notebook that I decided to carry to Paradigm, and because listening, always a straight A student. You're listening to someone, you're writing, whatever it is, and between speakers, you're doodling, or maybe you're putting a doodle in order to convey the idea that the person is, And I decided to show those doodles to Greg one day when we were, talking through Skype or whatever. It was, I guess, a caricature of Micah Hanks.
Yeah.
One of Nick Redfern or something like that. And he said, hey, would you be interested in illustrating or making illustrations for my book? He was at the time writing his book, that eventually will be titled "It Defies Language."
Yep.
Which is a collection of essays that he originally published through UFO Mystic, but then he reacquired the legal rights over those texts, and then he decided to put it in a book format. And he said, I want to like put some illustrations for each chapter, and I say, sure, and it was the first time someone asked me to do that,
And the illustrations are phenomenal. The book it's a wonderful book, and the illustrations you just nailed it.
Thank you. I mean, credit to Greg, because number one, because he trusted me with the assignment. Number two, because he barely gave me any censorship or guidelines. He said, well, whatever it is, you want to do, you do it. and that allowed me to like express ideas and to put things that in a very whimsical way. Maybe
Mhm.
some people will say, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa! This is not a comic," but Greg didn't mind, and then he said, "Okay, what about making the cover?" And at first, it was like, I don't know, because the
Yeah,
first
that's
time
a lot of
someone
pressure. Yeah.
exactly, and trying to learn, okay, what it is about designing a book cover, learning the ropes, and I remember there were always a few troubles. The first time I sent we sent the file, and then Greg received the proof copies, and there were issues. It wasn't perfect aligned, and
Right.
the perfectionist is saying, "What do you mean it's
Yeah.
1/8 of an inch out of line because I designed it perfectly?" No,
Yeah. Yeah.
but we managed to create it. Obviously, I look it in retrospect with both fondness and a little bit of cringeness because nowadays I could do so much better. But that is part of the creative process, to realize you're never gonna be able to reach that level of perfection.
Yep.
You always have to strive for it. Obviously,
Oh, yeah. Oh,
you
yeah.
always have to say, whenever you finish something, okay, I did it the best that I could. Obviously,
Yep.
3 years later, you will say, now I could do better.
Yep.
But that's proof that you have managed to progress as an artist. You have managed to also grow as a person. Yeah, I'm still very fond of the cover of It Defies Language because
It's a beautiful cover. I have it over on my bookshelf in front of me.
thank you. And after that, Greg convinced Robbie Graham, the late Robbie Graham, rest in peace, to get me to design the cover for this anthology, UFOs Reframing the Debate.
Another must-have in everyone's collection, in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you. And I must say that that is the one cover that probably I'm the most proud of still. I'll say, okay, regardless of a few little things that could be improved, but the idea is still very solid. The idea of conveying how opinions about the phenomenon is the only thing we have actually to try to make sense of it in our minds.
Yeah.
Because the phenomenon is probably unknowable.
Yep, I agree.
And we keep putting labels about it. Oh, they're demons. They're a threat.
They're interdimensional.
Yes, they're extraterrestrials.
Yeah.
They're gods. They are AI.
They're us from the future.
They're us from the future. Yeah. Yes. They're ghosts. They're the afterlife. These are just frameworks that we are using in order to try to make sense of it, the same way that we try to make sense of the universe by saying, oh, it's like a clockwork. And no, it's like a computer. No, it's like a quantum computer. Okay, whatever,
And what does that even mean? What's
They're just metaphors to say something that is there, that we're living in, and that is bigger than our imagination. But we still need to keep expanding our imagination, because I guess that's the reason we're here.
Yes, I agree. I agree so much, and I really do think, and on this show I talk about art a lot, and it just so happens that the vast majority, and this is not by design, but the vast majority of people I've had on are either artists by profession, or art is a big part of their life and they create art. Mm-hmm. And I do think being interested in Forteana and high strangeness in general synthesizes very well with art, especially I do feel like when I watch a surrealist film, or listen even to like weird surrealist outsider music, it feels like, at least to me, it almost feels like a simulation of what it must be like to have a Fortean experience.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like I think art and art and weirdness are just inextricably linked, and whether people like it or not. And like I know some people, like I've gotten comments where they're like, oh, you talk about art a lot and stuff, but to me it's I can barely tell the difference when I'm talking about art or high strangeness. It's the same to me almost.
Yeah, and obviously, we're not the first people to say or agree with the idea that artists are almost like channels,
Yeah,
that we are like vessels that
yeah,
are trying to be as clean as and as open as possible to let whatever it is that is out there, to fill us
yeah,
with these ideas. And then our job is to try to manifest those ideas in this reality as faithful as and as neatly as we can. Uh, that is the thing that I was very much in agreement when I read. I just read Diana Pasulka's book Encounters. I don't know if you've read
yes,
it.
I have, yeah,
So the idea of, Plato saying that there is this world of ideas,
hmm
where ideas actually exist before you actually imagine them. And this is something that someone like Alan Moore says, idea space.
yeah,
And this is place that artists can somehow travel to.
right. Well, and even like, I mean, I feel like, Carl Jung was sort of getting at the same thing, maybe not exactly in the same words, but he's like, we swim in a sea of archetypes.
Mm-hmm.
And different archetypes are pulled out of this ocean and presented to us. Why? No one really can know. We can speculate on it, but
Mm-hmm.
that's, like often how I think about why the UFO phenomenon, for example, has been changing. And it's like, it seems like not constantly changing, but it seems like every 10, 20 years, it appears or shows itself in a pretty dramatically different way.
Mm-hmm.
From flying airships to lights in the sky to saucers to triangles to tic tacs, you name it. Like, and now I feel like we're in this period maybe where we're about ready to see a new manifestation. Like it just seems like if it's following the timeline trajectory.
Yes, that's what I'm waiting to see. What it will be the next big iteration, because I feel that with regards to the phenomenon, at least, I feel that we're in some kind of like standstill,
Yeah, I
like
agree.
the calm before the storm, perhaps.
Yeah, yeah,
That we're not seeing this big. Some people say, "Well, what happened to the old UFO cases of the 1970s? That were
yeah,
so much more interesting, and you had." First of all, you had UFOs landing on the moon,
yeah.
and
Yep,
you barely hear about those nowadays, which
yep.
is interesting. Next, you also, people complaining about the homogeneity of the reports. If you actually have reports of beings associated with the phenomenon, we have now this kind of like cookie cutter idea
Yes.
of the beings you're expected to see, which is obviously the gray,
Yeah.
you know, small, big, almost like pear-shaped head with the almond eyes, whatever. Uh, whereas in the 1970s, you have this cacophony, all this menagerie of
Yes.
beings, with the
So many hundreds.
Pascagoula, like almost like mummies or cachinas, and you have
Yeah,
almost,
Michelin Men. I mean,
yeah,
it was all over the place.
yeah. You had like almost like walking bricks, and you had like wolfmans, and you had like blobs, and you had all
Yeah,
these stuffs, and now it almost feels stagnant, and
it
I'm not
does.
sure why.
Well, you don't. I mean, like you might know better than I, but I feel like in the last 20 years, I barely feel like I've heard about even humanoids or beings in associated with UFOs. Once the kind of like 90s fervor of the abduction era kind of,
Mm.
faded away, which I mean, maybe it's not. I'm just not, coming across it. But I feel like we don't hear about beings. I mean, it's really like, to put it bluntly, I feel like this has been the most boring 20 years of UFOs in the since for the last 100 years. And I know maybe a lot of people who are very interested in the political thriller aspect of disclosure would totally disagree with me. I think there's a lot of people that oh man, what are you talking about? The New York Times article and AARO and Lou Elizondo, like, But that is the most sure. I am definitely interested and know way more than I care to admit about the machinations of the government's history and UFOs and disinformation and all that stuff. However, I will say that is the most boring aspect of the phenomenon to me.
Yeah, I agree completely. Like, to me, one of the most interesting developments in ufology of the last 5 years has nothing to do with, you know, Congress hearings
Yeah.
in Washington or whatever, or whistleblowers coming and saying that, yes, they know someone who might have actually touched an ET craft.
Yeah.
Oh boy!
Okay, what am I supposed to do with that? Like.
Whereas things like what happened in Peru last year,
right?
Now that's interesting. That to me is the phenomenon. Maybe it actually has nothing to do with the UFOs, but it had really 100% to do with the lore of the stuff that was reported in the 70s.
Yeah.
Oh, indigenous people like being attacked.
Right.
By these entities that come at night and they fly away and they leave gods and they seem to ride jetpacks or whatever. That is the stuff that I would rather have analyzed by researchers instead of, we've talked about this, instead of, oh my God, the latest provisions of the National Defense Act that calls about this panel of that will go and revise the information. I was like, oh my God.
And there's such an aggressive vibe, like, put on your UFO war helmets. We're going to find the truth. I'm like, take it easy, man. Like, let's get healthcare first.
Because that's another thing, you see these people who have been expecting disclosure. They were promised disclosure since 2017.
Yeah.
They're growing impatient and they're growing angrier and angrier.
Oh, yeah.
And then the rhetoric, for some reason, I don't know if it's accidentally or actually someone deliberately, is making it more and more violent.
Yeah.
Like saying, all these people who put on the Arrow report, they should be and they should be stoned behind a pickup truck.
It's scary. I'm not like trying to be an alarmist, but like it's the same sort of rhetoric of the people who, on January 26th tried to burn down the Capitol building.
Exactly.
We are at the end of the day, folks, talking about UFOs. And while I love them, it's like, I don't know that there's anything to it. It might just be a mass hallucination. Who knows what it is? Mm-hmm. But the phenomenon, and if it is a mass hallucination, that's just as interesting to me. But if you are waiting around for a person from the government or military to tell you the answer you want to hear, I don't know. Lots of luck to you.
Exactly. Like you said, UFOs is a paradox because on the one hand might be the most important problem in the world, but at the same time is the least important problem in the world.
That's exactly
because
right.
We have so many other pressing issues we have to fix first. Like I would rather have our politicians spend resources trying to find ways to deal with climate change, dealing with pollution, and the problem with the oceans, with all the next coming global pandemic that probably will strike maybe next year or maybe
any old day now.
Any old day now, and meanwhile but we need to learn about the deal with the grays first. Well, no, not really. Yeah.
It would be nice. Sure, I would love to know what the government has, because I'm not saying look, I feel like I think there's something genuine about the UFO phenomenon, and if we are to suppose that it is, I'm sure the government has a lot more data than you or I do, but it doesn't mean they know what it is or it represents, or they have crashed wreckage or dead alien bodies. I'm just not convinced it works like that. You know?
Yeah, exactly. You know.
So it's. I feel like people are just going to be waiting forever, and I would rather focus on like thought experiments and having engaging conversations with people like you. Anyway, that's the disclosure part of the show. But what we have to talk about, because we were talking about art earlier, so this isn't exactly the smooth segue I was hoping for, but sorry, don't get me off on a disclosure tangent. I start freaking out. But the UFO tarot deck, I cannot say enough wonderful things about it. First off, the art is absolutely just out of this world great.
Thank
Miguel, like you fucking nailed it. It's just so breathtakingly beautiful. Like even my wife, who doesn't know anything about this stuff, she loves this deck. Because she just thinks, and she doesn't understand who any of the people are, which I think is so interesting. And she loves. She's like, oh, it's so like layered with different like little like Easter eggs. I'm like, yes, it is, and it's. You just really nailed it. And to me, I feel like it's one of the most exciting things to come out of the UFO world in years. So would you mind kind of talking about how the idea for this came about and the team that was involved?
Sure. First of all, thank you to you and your wife for the kind words. That's exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to create something that will be of value to people, even if they knew nothing about UFOs or even the tarot, you know?
Yeah.
Just say, oh my God, you know, this is something, and just to appreciate it for a couple of seconds, and maybe that appreciation would inspire in them the idea of saying, oh, you know, maybe I want to learn something about the tarot, or maybe I want to learn something about these people I don't know nothing about that seem to be related to this UFO stuff that people keep talking about. That was my one concern, you know, as an artist, that my one goal that I wanted to fulfill.
You achieved that, let me tell you.
Thank you. It wasn't easy.
Yeah, of course, nothing is.
Exactly, you know, that's exactly when you put your heart into something that you really deeply care. And the thing that how it came about, and this is something that I created an entire very lengthy video over almost 90 minutes of length that was part of this online conference that Ryan Sprague put up last year.
I will. By the way, I will link that in the show notes because your lecture about the cards is phenomenal. It's so good. It was by far my favorite lecture of the whole event.
Thank you.
Good.
The first time that I actually edited the video, you know, first time that I recorded one, and this time I had to like learn as I went, which is always fun to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, so how it came about is that Greg, after the development of the UFO Reforming the Debate anthology, Greg started to like gather some of the people who were part of that project because he wanted to create some kind of like a UFO group. And the idea with Greg, and this is something that I actually wholeheartedly agree with, like many of Greg's ideas, is that the best UFO groups are small ones, not the big institution ones, because it's like companies, right? You know, Apple when it was just you know, Steve and the two Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs working on a shack. Yeah, that's when they were the most revolutionary, right? And maybe when they had like 10, 20 people in their company. But the moment it becomes Apple Inc., one of the biggest companies in the world, that's because that's the moment a company becomes stagnant, and then they invest $1 billion in an electric car. Oh my God, it didn't go anywhere. Scrap the car. Okay, move forward. And so, same thing with UFO groups. UFO groups, if they become too big, they are just interested in safeguarding a certain dogma. Let's call it dogma. The idea, UFOs, ET craft, or UFOs, nonsense.
Right.
There will be the same with MUFON, who are the believers, or CSI or Psychops, who would think that UFOs are a bunch of nonsense. The best groups are the guys small enough that they've but committed enough, they can still send people in the field, talk to the witnesses, take pictures, take measurements, speak to the witnesses, tell them ask them about what happened, what they felt, their feelings, maybe return to the site 6 months later to see if there's been any changes in their behavior, in their attitude. Those are the best UFO groups, and there are still a lot of them out there, doing a lot of work. Obviously, not only in ufology, also in UFO hunting, cryptozoology, Bigfoot hunters. Those are the real troopers. The people, the unsung heroes of these fields. So Greg wanted to have a small group of like-minded individuals. He wanted to pitch in ideas and almost like a online virtual paramania conference, shooting the shit, discussing gossip, joking around, and then once in a while trying to actually do a specific project. The first project that Greg wanted to do was something called what is the name of this? He wanted to create some kind of oblique cards that would be helpful for people who were in a creative rut.
Right. I have them. I have a set.
Like Brian Eno's.
Exactly.
Creative. But he wanted those cards to also help people in the field to try to expand their perception. Maybe they think that UFOs are this, but the cards will help them to entertain the idea that UFOs are something else.
Right.
If anything, it will help writers to tackle a creative rut in order to finish a project.
Right.
And we did that. It was fun. And then after that, the group started to lose aim, lose interest. We still wanted to do some exercises. We did things like this exercise the surrealists created, the exquisite corpse.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Someone comes up with some phrase or a verse.
Yeah. That's the Brian Geisen experiment, right?
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. And we tried to do that for a while, but it wasn't really our thing. And then at that moment, Greg said, well, I had always this idea of that I always wanted to do something like a tarot deck, but instead of the typical archetype, I will use people of ufology. And that is something that everybody said, yes, that is a cool project. That is something that that will be cool to work with. And for a while it was like, yeah, sounds cool, but it was like something like this imaginary baseball league.
Right. Yeah.
Like something like you're playing around, but at one point saying, well, enough playing around. Let's put up or shut up.
Yeah, it's a way to interact. It's right. It's an active project. I like that.
Right. And then it's when everybody started looking to me and saying, well, I'm like, well, God, okay. Let me try to draw one card and see if I actually have the chops. Because, like I said, Steve, I've always been my number one critic.
Right.
Whatever I do, I'm never satisfied with it. I'm fully aware of my limitations as a designer, as an artist, and I'm always trying to learn, but I know I'm always, not as good as I would want to be. But anyway, I decided to give it a go and say, what the hell? I created the first card which was the Magician, which was everybody knew from the get-go that card has to be Jacques Vallée.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah. Perfect.
But obviously, like you said, the beauty of the UFOlogy tarot project is not that it's just, okay, replacing the main image with, the face of the UFO character. We wanted to imbue each card with the magic of the life and the work and the career of those individuals by putting all these Easter egg and these elements, that spoke about the personality of that character, And by that time, I had managed to read quite a lot about Vallée, not only, Passport to Magonia and Invisible College and all that,
Right.
but also his published journals, Forbidden Science.
So good.
Yeah.
Actually, my favorite Vallée might be those.
Yeah. To me, my favorite Vallées and also my favorite Fortean books, to this date are those, because he's such a good chronicler of his time, and he was such a privileged chronicler of his time,
right?
Almost like Don Giovanni, like Casanova in Italy in the Renaissance, that helps you understand life in Europe in the 17th century. You read Vallée and you manage to learn how is it like to live around the time of the computer revolution in the United States in the 1960s and 70s. When people say, these little contraptions with diode tubes and transistors, and you saw those people saying, "Yeah, this is going to change the world," and you reading that in 2020 and said, "Oh yeah, yes it did."
It sure did.
So I tried to use that, my knowledge of Vallée and my admiration for Vallée, of course, as a framework for that card, putting all those elements. For example, he's involved with SRI, Stanford Research Institute, which was at the time developing all these tools that will be of use for the Stargate, the Psychic Spies program that was run by the CIA and then the military for, 30 odd years. People should watch documentaries like Third Eye Spies.
That's a real thorough look into that scene.
And also, I wanted to honor Vallée's involvement in the development of the ARPANET, which is obviously like the grandfather of our modern internet, and that's why I decided to put this kind of like a spider web there, a little spider there, and to put these elements that made reference to Vallée's and Hynek's, his mentors, interest in Rosicrucianism, which is this Western esoteric philosophy that is about trying to, it's almost like trying to worship God by studying nature and trying to unravel the mysteries of nature through science, understanding that God made us in his image, and then we are rational beings. That means that if we use our rationality to understand the creation of God, we are honoring God, right? That is kind of like one of the things that these guys, the Rosicrucians, were about. And obviously Rosicrucianism, some people say, well, this wasn't really a real secret society. It was more like a legend, but or a hoax. Or nevertheless, it was a hoax that had a lot of impact because it influenced the eventual founders of the American nation, right? Yeah. Because they wanted to create like the utopia the Rosicrucians were talking about, a land where people will be free out of the shackles of the church in order to go and learn and explore nature. And
Right.
we are the inheritors, for better or for worse, of that idea. Because obviously that idea has its repercussions. Like you saw the Oscars, you saw that Oppenheimer.
Sure.
People were making the joke that Oppenheimer once again managed to wipe out the competition for the second time. But that's the idea. That obviously learning the secrets of nature has its dangers,
Yeah.
and there's all these legends of scientists receiving visits from strange individuals. Like one of them was a good friend of Jacques Vallée by the name of Jacques Vergier, who was a nuclear scientist, and there's the idea that he received a visit from some strange guy in the 1930s who told him that nuclear research, which was going to be very important in the coming decades, was also very dangerous. Because what this guy told him is that centuries ago, there was highly advanced civilization that managed to unlock the secrets of the atom and got wiped out because of that. So there was this danger that, nuclear research could be the doom of mankind.
Right.
And obviously, we know that later in the 1950s, we had all these UFO contactees receiving these visits of the Space Brothers, telling us that we Earthlings should just discard of nuclear weapons, because otherwise we're going to not only wreak havoc on our planet, but also on all the cosmos, because all of creation is connected.
Yep.
So it's very interesting how these ideas of these strange visitors warning you about that there is forbidden knowledge.
Right.
And they're coming and saying, hey, you should not cross this line, or if you cross it, beware that there's a price to pay.
There's no going back. Yeah.
Exactly. There is no going back. Once the genie is out of the bottle, and obviously, aside from the nuclear thing, you and I and everybody listening to this are now living in this new era in which AI is the new genie that is being very hurriedly
That's exactly right.
taken out of the bottle, because of all these economic interests. And we are all, very worried about what will happen once that genie is finally out, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, even like the Secretary Department, or like some political wing of the U.S. government just released a quote the other day, and I did not read the article, unfortunately, but they were saying, like, AI is to be considered an extinction level threat.
Exactly.
And I'm like, okay, well.
And also, getting back to Forbidden Science, I don't know if you remember reading in the first one, in the 1960s, Jacques, who was also a computer scientist, he wrote about talking to a strange man with gray hair, very tall, who they were starting to talk about how to build intelligent machines.
Right.
And this strange man told him that the error that everybody was making at that time was that they were trying to mimic the human brain. And he said, this is a mistake, because humans, he told Jack, did not invent airplanes by mimicking the air flight of birds.
Right.
A bird flapped its wings and managed to create lift in order to beat gravity. This is not the way, he told him, that modern airplanes managed to lift off the ground. So this is the thing that computer sciences needs to learn, that in order to create a thinking machine, they don't necessarily need to mimic the way the human brain works.
That is
And
very
to this
interesting.
day, I want to know who the fuck was this guy.
Yeah, who was this dude?
Who was this motherfucker? You know?
Yeah. He has some pretty interesting ideas.
Exactly, you know?
That's so interesting, because if you think about, like, I've seen like pictures of, like, oh god, early 20th century people trying to build flying machines, but they literally would build things that mimicked a bird, and they would like have people pulling on ropes trying to like flap the wings, and they would go nowhere.
Exactly.
So you're so right. It took us a while to say, like, maybe we're, you know, looking at birds and thinking that's our answer, but it's not.
Exactly. So
that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I would just recommend everyone, if you were lucky enough to get a deck of cards, cherish them, because they're absolutely beautiful. And the valet card is great. I did choose, because I signed up for like the VIP tier or whatever. And I know, look, I was an early supporter, but I got a signed Keel card. And it was either between Jacques or Keel, but I went with Keel just because, I mean, he's so fun. He's in my opinion, like, Jacques Vallée is probably the most, in terms of the way I think, probably is the most important author of UFOs to me. But Keel, to me, is just the most fun. Like, it's entertainment, you know, while still really his ideas were groundbreaking in the way he looked at, you know, Fortean studies was so unique. But the way he wrote the story, how he told stories, is just so damn entertaining. Like, I miss writers like him.
I feel more identified with Keel than with Jacques, to be honest. You know, I feel that the Keel card is, to me as an artist, it feels like more of an achievement than the magician one. Well, the magician one was the prototype, obviously, and if the magician one hadn't worked, and by the way, even before the other ones were made, Greg showed the magician card to Jacques Vallée himself, almost like to get the Pope of UFO research to give his blessing to this project, you know. And at first he was resistant to do, but when he learned first that there were going to be other people portrayed, including obviously Hynek, you know, he said, "Oh, Alan is going to be there. Yes, he's going to be the emperor." And that's when he opened up to it. And then Greg showed him the card, and the way that Greg described it to me in the scene is that Jacques just stared at it for a while and smiling. And thinking about that in my mind, I said, okay, he got it. You know, he saw, because also aside from, I don't know if you remember the little like imp that I put behind the table. That obviously that was a homage to another one of his mentors, Aimé Michel. A very prominent ufologist from France, a very important thinker that should be praised more.
Agreed.
You know, that there was that. So, okay, getting back to Keel, and I also remember that when I finished that one, that was when we had the first really big, shocking synchronicity involving the project, because when I finished that card and I sent it to the guys and say, okay, I'm done, that's when I realized, oh shit, this is the anniversary of the Point Pleasant collapse.
Oh, no
bridge.
Shit.
Yes,
it's great.
Back in December.
And
it was totally unplanned, because the way that I work on this project, it wasn't like in order, right? You know, there is an order to the keys of the cards. I didn't want to do that. You know, the way that we were dealing with the cards is that each week we talked about a particular card to try to see how to solve it. And obviously, some cards were easier to deduct than others. Obviously, like I said, the Hermit from the beginning we said yes, kill. Like the Word card, that took forever to
Yeah.
to figure out. You know, it was one of the last cards to solve. So that's the way we worked the project. You know, it was very organic. It was very magical. You know, and I remember the moment that happened, I said, "Shit, you know, this is
Yeah.
really something going on," you know. And then I became more and more uncomfortable with the idea that, you know, I'm not really at the wheel of this thing, you know. Like, yeah, I'm the conductor, but I'm not really in charge of how
Right.
this thing is going to end,
Yeah.
you know. And more really interesting synchronicities happened. You know, I talked about that in the video presentation that I mentioned previously, and we also mentioned that in the book that we ended up editing as part of the Kickstarter campaign. Some of the synchronicities were really interesting. Some of them were pleasant. Some of them were very painful.
Yeah.
I have to say, you know, uh, some of them were very personal, not only to me but also to the other members of the project. And now I have to emphasize, yes, I was probably the one who worked the most in it, because I thought about them, well, possibly aside from Greg, for longer than
Yeah.
the other guys, but it wasn't just me. It was the work of 5 individuals, you know, who, you know, lent their efforts. And it was almost like, remember the idea of the Philip experiment.
Oh yeah.
The idea,
I was gonna mention that earlier. This almost sounds like a
Mhm,
a Philip experiment.
exactly. It's that, you know, it's when people combine their energies, you
Yeah.
know, and that's when the magic happens. You know,
It really is. It's so beautiful. And would you mind naming the 5 contributors along with yourself
sure,
and
you
Greg
know,
Bishop?
obviously, me, Greg Bishop, Susan Demeter,
Hmm.
Joshua Cochin, David Metcalf.
Yeah.
Were the guys who were behind them. We tried to convene almost on a weekly basis on Zoom, you know, to work on them. So there were hours and hours and hours on them of you know, pitching ideas and and playing with ideas and toying with ideas and laughing, and sometimes, you know, getting into discussions and getting into fights,
Sure.
because that's the
That's
way a project goes. Because sooner or later the project starts to be something imaginary, and it needs to like manifest, and then there's when you need, it's like a baby, you know. Okay,
yeah. It
you
is.
need to go and buy some diapers because this baby, you know, just pooped. And
It's true, but I do feel like any artistic, collaborative artistic endeavor that I've been a part of, and truly I've only mostly been a part of collaborative efforts. It's always been that emotional roller coaster where it's like we're having a great time and then people start fighting and then they make up and then we have new ideas. Now we're going to, it's like it's a thing that's totally in flux and it requires a lot of patience. And so my hats off to you because I mean like it is just such a great meaningful project. And I don't really even like I have a loose understanding of tarot, but I pull
no,
out
me
those.
too.
I pull out those cards and just kind of flip one every once in a while
Mm,
and I'm not necessarily even using it for my a deeper understanding of UFOs, just to incorporate a new idea into my day.
exactly.
Do you know what I'm
Great.
saying? As like
Yes.
if I have an audition coming up, I'm like, I drew the Hynek card. How can I
Mm,
infuse that into this character I'm supposed to portray? Like you can use it for it's not just for
I love that.
UFO buffs like yourself. UFOs are the vehicle in like the how we take in like the visual for the information, but it goes deeper than that, to me at least. So
That's so
I
great.
just think they're so valuable and some of the most exciting contributions to the UFO field. And the last years. If people can have their disclosure, but I'm more excited about the UFO tarot deck. To me, that's way more important.
Thank you. Well,
dude, well, before I let you go, I want to ask you a couple questions about Mexican high strangeness. And I honestly cannot remember if I'm making this up in my head, but in the early 2000s, I felt like I was seeing these, and look, these might be like Jaime Maussan videos that I should just, not pay attention to. But there were I felt like there was a lot of videos coming out with like flying witches.
Yeah.
And like there was like a lot of flying winged or like a flying humanoid type videos and sightings.
Yeah.
Do you know much about that? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's interesting. Like you mentioned Jaime Maussan, right?
Yeah.
And I'm in my life, I have a strange love-hate relationship with Maussan because on the one hand, I hate the way he keeps exploiting the phenomenon for financial gain.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I wouldn't be talking to you right now if it weren't for him.
Yeah.
Because I was a young, impressionable kid in the 1990s. In 1991, when we had this major total solar eclipse in Mexico, which, by the way, we're going to have another one just next month, which is interesting. It feels almost like some kind of like omen of sorts, but maybe that's just me. But back in those days, Maussan was the guy.
Yeah. I mean, even over in the U.S., I mean, he was putting out the most salacious UFO videos, like the Mexico City one. I was like, oh my God. As a kid, I loved it.
For better or for worse, man, he was like the go-to guy when if someone, like, oh my God, you knew that your aunt somehow went to some like relative's wedding and then they took a picture and above the church there was this weird disc coming out and they said, what the hell?
Yeah.
Everybody said, well, you should send that to Jaime Maussan because this is the guy who knows about those stuff. So he became the repository of all the UFO evidence in Mexico, for better or for worse. And obviously, probably 90% of those videos are BS or are reason to explain. He keeps exploiting them anyway. But there's that 10%, man. There's that 10% that is probably worth checking out. And among those videos were videos taken. I remember one in northern state of Monterrey, which is close to the border. Northern state of Nuevo León in the city of Monterrey. And there was in this like mountain. You saw that video of a thing that almost looked like it was like riding like a stick, almost like a
broomstick. Right? Yes. Okay, that is what I remembered.
Yes, I remember that.
Okay, good.
And aside from that, there was this testimony of a young police officer who got almost like jumped by. He saw that was like a woman with glowing red eyes, like almost like drained him of energy or something. He was obviously shocked. And aside from that, a few videos that maybe they were some sort of balloon, but they were interesting nonetheless because they almost looked like some kind of like humanoid form moving, very static, over Mexico City. And Mexico City is such a big city, obviously. So difficult to control what's on the air. There's balloons, whatever. But still, yes, those videos, I wouldn't dismiss them like just saying because oh, they're from Jaime Maussan, therefore, just forget about it.
Right.
I think that would be a mistake.
Hmm.
I think that the videos deserve further scrutiny. Who knows? There could be something there.
Right. Right. Well, I remember when I saw him, I was blown away, and I loved, especially the video, because I mean, it looked like to me a witch riding a broomstick.
Yes.
Or I mean, not necessarily a witch, but it looked like a humanoid figure riding what to me looked like a broomstick. So yeah, it looked like the classic Wicked Witch.
Yeah. Remember, I said that I wanted to be a priest. There was a time when I was going to these really, really poor, like hamlets or
Yeah.
little towns, to do like missionary work and whatever.
Sure.
And you will go and stay with some family, that will took you in, and they will say, showing you the view of the town, and there was this, like hill beyond the town, and say, from time to time we see all these balls of fire, and people say those are witches that they transform, and they go and they transform into balls of fire to battle their enemies. And it was like, what the hell? Obviously, back then I would say, well, obviously these people are confusing the UFO phenomenon, which are obviously ET craft with their, no? But nowadays I'm not that sure, maybe.
No, I know.
Nowadays I'm more open, I will say, to the idea of, sentient beings transforming themselves into plasma balls.
Yeah.
From time to time.
Well, it's funny because, like, you start out pretty certain that it's ET coming from another hard rock planet somewhere outside of our solar system.
Right.
And then as you go along, you start becoming more open to like the wildest ideas.
Right.
And, really, like to me, anything's on the table. Like there's no wrong answer. Like it may be a little bit of everything. Who knows?
So it's a potpourri, like you said.
Yeah.
You started thinking about ET craft and science and astronomy, but if you're not careful, you start drawing sigils and thinking about trying to learn Enochian magic.
Yep. It's going to lead there eventually.
And then you learn that someone like Jacques Vallée has a huge library devoted to fallen angels, and say, okay, so maybe there's something there, because this guy, has spent so many years thinking about the same thing.
Oh yeah. I mean, and like we were mentioning earlier, it's like at a certain point when you're deeply into UFOs, eventually, and it's not going to take very long, you're going to start reading about things you never thought you'd be interested in before. And
Mm-hmm.
that really is, that's the takeaway. Like, sometimes I'm like, man, have I been wasting my entire, because when I think about it, like 75% of the books I've ever read in my life are Fortean books.
Mm-hmm.
And every once in a while I'll be like, oh no, should I have been reading like more like, Chaucer or, like, or Chekhov or something more like, but then at the same time, I'm like, not really, because it has led me down a path of things I would never know about before. Like UFOs, it sounds weird to say, have made me a smarter person, I think.
I agree completely. It's huge. Obviously, there's the idea of people poo-pooing UFOs or accusing UFOs of being a cult.
Yeah.
Or people studying UFOs and considering it to be a religion.
Yeah.
To me, I came to the conclusion that in my life, I treat it as not as a religion, but definitely as a spiritual path.
Yeah.
And like you said, the beauty of this path is that it is kind of narrow, it is kind of tortuous, it bends, moves from here to there, but it will always keep moving you forward, and it will always keep you presenting with more and more ideas, and it keeps expanding your knowledge.
That's
exactly
right.
That's the beauty of it,
It is.
Finally, the realization, especially if you're an older guy like us, that we're never going to find the answer.
No.
And that is okay. That's
Mhm.
totally fine, because the goal is not to find the answer. The goal is, as cliche as it sounds, as Walt Disney picture as it sounds, the journey is the
Yeah.
destination.
Yeah. And not to mention, it also brings together two people who can become really good friends
Exactly.
who live in completely different countries.
Mm-hmm.
You and I never would have known each other, you know?
Exactly.
So, I mean, like, and I cherish our friendship, and like, your work has meant a lot to me, and I'm always so excited I get to be friends with a guy like Miguel,
Thank you.
like such a thoughtful, talented, wonderful, sweet person. So that to me is like, if that's all I get out of UFOs, which it definitely isn't, then what a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm. I
Because I
agree.
get to meet all these people who were smarter than me and can teach me so much, and I get to have these thought-provoking discussions, which for me, that's what life is all about. It's like, let's explore mystery together. And that's what UFOs are. It's a lens to explore mystery. Enchant your life a little bit.
It's a lens to explore mystery, and it's a lens to enchant, life.
Yeah.
Just because life without enchantment can very easily become unbearable.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah.
If you,
that's what I think about. I think about capitalism, and not to get political, but like, I feel like capitalism is like a way to disenchant people, where it's like,
right.
Keep your eye on the prize, money, get stuff, do this, watch Monday Night Football, watch fear-based news, or don't. Like, and like, you can, even though if you're under a capitalistic regime or a government that isn't really working for you, and that's goes for most places in the world, you can kind of take ownership of the world around you and life around you when you are chasing mystery.
I agree. Because
it's, in a way, it's saved my psyche the last 5 years.
Yes, it saved mine too.
Yeah.
Some people, all those people who are obsessed with disclosure, they should really think about what is the end goal there.
Yeah.
Okay, to have some hotshot in the White House will say, okay, yes, aliens are here.
Yeah.
We were lying to you all this time.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Right.
My bad.
And for that reason alone, they'll never, if they know anything, like let's suppose they know everything about UFOs, they'll never tell us, because then they lose control. And the government is a control system. So
sucks.
Therefore, and even if they did, what evidence is going to be good enough for people? Truly, in this day and age where you can fake anything, what evidence is possibly going to be good enough for disclosure activists?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd rather keep asking questions, wondering, and maybe trying to interact with the mystery in my own way, like we all have the capacity to dream. We all have the capacity to engage, all these secret knowledge, we're talking about sigils and things. Everybody can write a sigil,
Yeah.
Everybody can try to make some kind of like charm, enchantment. Everybody can have a lucid dream.
Yeah.
Everybody can have their own close encounter experience, I feel.
Yep.
To have their own answers. And that should be enough, and maybe if your neighbor doesn't believe you, does it really matter?
No.
It should be enough. It should be enough that you have enough magic in your world to keep you, looking into the sky with awe and wonder. And if you're lucky enough, with thankfulness in your heart, because that's the only thing that you will manage to, keep you, from, I don't know, doing something stupid.
I hear you. Right fucking on, man. Miguel, Absurd by Design is where people can find your work. And they can also, if I'm right, if you're, you have enough time on your hands, they can even commission work from you. Am I right?
Yes. I will be very welcome if someone could contact me to, request my services as an illustrator, a designer, and
Yeah,
I'm totally open for commissions.
Yeah, you are the man to go to for that. Trust me, folks. So, where can people find you and your work? Obviously, Absurd by Design, but is there some other places you'd like to
The Daily
mention?
Grail, and obviously there's also Where Did the Road Go? Our
Yes.
friend Soraya
Yeah.
keeps calling me for our regular roundtables and salons where I interact with like-minded people like you, and that's probably where the people will find me. And I should also say that the Daily Grail has a YouTube page.
Yes.
We're not very active because Greg and I have a very busy, timetable. He probably more than I, because he, has a life. But we try to put videos from time to time. We have guests like you. We're trying to have guests like Mike Leland, and maybe some other interesting personalities in the future. So please, people should also check us out there on YouTube, Daily Grail.
And give out your Twitter, because you're one of my favorite follows on Twitter.
Oh, red_Pill Junkie. I think it's my account on Twitter. I will never call it X,
Yeah, I won't either.
Fuck Elon Musk.
Yep. I agree. Miguel, thank you so much for giving me your time, man. This was so much fun. You are just absolute shining light of wonderful ideas and positivity in a field that can get kind of murky sometimes. So you are a lighthouse, my friend, for people who are looking for good information. I'm serious though. Look, I'm not just trying to butter your biscuit here, but you are really a treasure in this field, a field that is so important to me and to a lot of people listening. So thank you for all your contributions and all you do, my friend. This is so fun to chat with you.
Thank you. This has been a blast, and I'm looking forward to having another conversation with you, my man.
Absolutely, man. Well, hopefully you'll get to the U.S. sometime soon, or if I ever find myself in Mexico, let's go get a ton of beers.
Yeah. By all means, I'll show you the rounds.
Yeah, man. I would love that. Buddy, you have an amazing rest of your week, and we will talk again very soon.
Gracias.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to High Strangeness. We'll see you next time. Enjoy your dinners tonight.
Mm-hmm.